The ripple effects of the Air Canada flight attendant strike are still being felt. At least 500,000 travelers have been impacted, with many trying to recoup their costs. Joining us is Air Passenger Rights President Gabor Lukacs to help us navigate through all of this confusion. Gabor, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Angela. It's good to be with you.
So, Gabor, the latest development is Air Canada has now created this form online for people to fill out. So who is eligible for reimbursement?
Any passenger who had a flight that was canceled and Air Canada failed to rebook them on alternate carriers or its own carriers within the parameters of the APPR is entitled to recoup their expenses for alternate transportation under the law. Air Canada's form does not seem to fully support that, for example, in situations that you booked your ticket through a travel agent or a vacation package, but you are still owed the same rights legally as if you purchase a ticket from Air Canada. Don't let that mislead you to believe that you don't have the same rights. What Air Canada is doing now is essentially they are partly misrepresenting what is anyway their legal duty for international passengers as a goodwill gesture. With respect to passengers traveling within Canada who incurred meals and accommodation expenses during the strike, Air Canada is going beyond and above what it was required to do by offering reimbursement passengers for those. However, if you were traveling internationally, then you are entitled to reimbursement for your meals, accommodation, lost wages, and even prepaid expenses at the for activities at destination that you missed under the Montreal Convention. Air Canada is not doing you just a goodwill gesture. In addition, if you were flying back from the European Union, don't forget to assert your right to a lump sum standardized compensation of up to 600 euros or 520 British pounds in one of those forms to which you are entitled as a matter of law.
When I was out at YVR covering the story, I met with many international travelers who had told me that they received an email saying that they weren't going to get reimbursed meals, accommodation, transportation because this was out of the airline's control, saying that this was due to a labor disruption. So what do you make of Air Canada now having this form online?
So unfortunately, the Air Passenger Protection Regulation of Canada is incredibly poorly drafted. It was drafted to favor the airlines over the passengers. And for under the APPR, if it is an ongoing strike, not before or after the strike, you are not entitled to meals and accommodation. But the APPR is the floor, not the ceiling. For passengers traveling internationally, they have additional protection under the Montreal Convention, which is also part of the Canadian law book, part of the Federal Carriage by Air Act. This means that just because there's no meals or accommodation owed under Canada's broken APPR, it doesn't mean that you're not owed that. What Air Canada is doing now is trying to avoid many lawsuits based on the Montreal Convention, which would apply to international travelers from Vancouver traveling anywhere else internationally, and is saying we're just going to pay. It is a good PR, it is a good move, but let's understand that it is only a goodwill gesture for passengers traveling entirely within Canada. This overall situation just underscores how much behind Canada is with respect to the Western world international standards when it comes to protection of passengers. We should have a proper air passenger protection regulations like the European Union has, which recognizes that strikes of the airline's own employees is just business as usual, and the airline should provide meals, accommodation, and a lump sum compensation, like in Europe, to passengers affected by it. There is no reason on earth why Canadian passengers should get anything less in terms of rights than our European counterparts.
We're almost out of time, but I want you to just quickly touch on what happens if a traveler had already accepted a refund, because I know a lot of people already have.
If you were tricked into accepting a refund, then I would still assert right to alternate transportation, noting that it was not a genuine consent to refund, but it was based on misrepresentation. Air Canada has been misrepresenting passengers that there were no other flights available, while in reality there were. However, generally, it makes your situation much more difficult, so never accept a refund unless you're absolutely sure you don't want to travel. Insist on reimbursement of alternate transportations after the fact as a general principle.
Thank you so much for your time, Gabor. Gabor Lukacs with Air Passenger Rights.
Thank you for having me.